to have you with us here watching Inspire India, and I'm Avni Raja. Now, stories of hope and humanity amid the unprecedented second wave. On Inspire India, we bring you such stories of people who have gone out of their way to help others, all of those in need amidst this difficult time. In fact, these are engaged in humanitarian work to help the poor, the needy, and the marginalized amid the COVID crisis. On today's show, we are showcasing two such COVID heroes. Joining me is Sanobar Fatma of Indian Civil Liberties Union from Hyderabad. They are helping those in need of food, oxygen, and remdesivir injections as well amid the crisis. And our other guests are Mutib Zohib, who is an automobile engineer and a racer based out of Bengaluru. He, along with his brother, are helping out patients reach the hospital in time. In fact, thank you for joining us at this point. Let me start here with going to Zohib. And in fact, Murtaza Junaid is also with us on this as well. So Zohib, if you can first take us through what exactly, how you do this and how you manage going about this entire process.
Actually, it started because we both are like own brothers, and we are into social media influencing also on Instagram and YouTube. So we just like used to share only our motorcycling related things. So we started getting a lot of like requirements where of the oxygen, of the bed, and also to ferry the dead bodies and the patients from one hospital to the another. So in the first week of May, so then we got a requirement where there were ambulances, but there were no drivers to take a dead body at one particular day. So I myself enrolled myself as a volunteer over there as an ambulance driver. So we are working, it's been almost a month that every night we both are working as a night shift volunteer ambulance drivers. So we ferry patients with whatever the requirement we get. So very recently I had been to Gulbarga via Hyderabad. That was from Bangalore to Gulbarga, around 600 kilometers, taking a black fungus infected patient where his bed was not available in Bangalore. So we had to take that patient to Gulbarga and get him admitted over there. So we also take all the religion, all the creed of the dead bodies. So we do the last rites and the cremation as well.
All right. Junaid, if you can also come in here, what sort of inspired this entire issue here that you felt that this is what you needed to focus on during this second wave?
Okay, sorry. Rather than when initially in the second wave of a second lockdown, what happened this year, we were sharing Instagram posts of requirements of bed, oxygen, and even for ambulance. And that point of time, there were a lot of questions, and we were not feeling still not sufficient enough to. We were not. It was not satisfying actually. That we are doing something. We felt like doing more. And me and Zohib, we were regularly talking about it. And then we got an opportunity. And the thing which inspired us, rather than talking or pointing fingers, it's better to do something. So we just put our minute, we just put some minute of our service to the community.
Absolutely. Zohib, the other part, of course, is the kind of difficulties you probably would have faced, because we on Mirror Now also did a lot of checks with respect to private ambulance operators who were charging literally, the sky as far as taking it and trying to take advantage of people who were in need. But what was your experience in sort of working with the authorities in getting all of this going and carrying this out?
See, actually, how it started was a lot of like in the first week of May, where I have literally seen patients getting ferried in two-wheelers, in autos, and losing their life in front of my eyes because of the lack of oxygen and also the unavailability of the oxygen. Coming to the ambulance services, where I have seen a patient, a dead body being shifted from Bangalore to Mangalore, hardly around 350 kilometers, charging around 85,000 rupees for the same. And for a distance of from hospital to the cremation ground, where a lot of like tourist tempo travelers have been converted into the ambulances these days without even the oxygen. So where we got an involvement where it is of free of cost and there is no charges for any of the patients or the dead bodies. So this was the only way we could serve our country and do our little bit. Because I have lost my mom 3 to 4 months before. So we were going through that pain and looking at the people's pain and what they were going through. At least if we could save someone by taking them on time and reaching over them, not like an employed ambulance driver, but as in volunteers. Because I have been like waiting for 5 hours in an hospital just to take the patient inside and a lot of many other things on the grounds.
Yes, I'm so sorry to hear that, Zohaib and Junaid. My condolences at this point. In fact, Junaid, this of course must have been an extremely difficult time given what you had gone through personally as well, and to see everything around sort of, at least till now, of course, things are slightly better with the numbers coming down. But a few months ago, a few weeks ago even, everything was in a complete mess. Things were really crumbling in terms of the infrastructure. What are the other big challenges that you faced in doing what you had to do, in trying to connect with those people who needed help? How did people contact you? How was that link established?
See, basically, we are working for an NGO, so we were assigned tickets. And whenever we used to get individual tickets, we used to get all the history and the contact person for who was responsible, who had contacted us. So we used to go there and meet the contact the SPOC and assist the. We used to prepare ourselves for the situation because before we leave, we used to read the whole requirement and we used to prepare ourselves and prepare our ambulances for the job, and we used to head over there. And the problem what we used to face is getting a patient is not an issue, but getting that patient admitted in a hospital after reaching the hospital, that was a painful job because the procedure and the paperwork which we had to go through, and literally we have got sometimes we are like in the peak moments where our oxygen cylinder in our ambulance was about to get over, and that's the time where we got the patient admitted. It was like literally it was in a rush.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I was going to come to the part about oxygen because obviously there was a huge issue, till some time back with regard to oxygen supply. Zohaib, how did you deal with that in terms of, getting oxygen supply? Again, there were ambulances which were charging more because those were ambulances that had oxygen, but accessing oxygen, getting that supply when there was such a crunch, how did you go about that?
See, we normally, what we did is we collaborated with an NGO where our physical appearance and help would be there. And they have been collaborated with a lot of hospitals over here who would ferry and give us the oxygen cylinders for the patients in the ambulances. And also they used to give for the patients who have been recovered from COVID-19 and at home. So there were like more than like 500 cylinders just given in this from NGO. So we have to be like very appreciable for that. So at that point of time, it was good. But I have seen at a time where I had a patient where I have to take him, his saturation was around 45. And we ourselves in our ambulance, we were not having the oxygen. So we had to take someone else's help where only half of the oxygen cylinder was available in someone else's ambulance. So we had to swap that cylinder and continue our journey and take the patient with 4 liters and 5 liters and rush to hospital. And even in the hospital authorities, once we reach over there, we inform the authorities that this patient should be given the oxygen cylinders from the stretcher and taken back to the bed.
Yes, absolutely. I can imagine must have been quite a difficult process to actually get the help that is needed. All right, request you please stay with us. I also want to go across to Rikit Shahi, who's in fact a fourth-year law student and is a part of the Indian Civil Liberties Union. Rikit, thank you so much for joining us here. If you can first tell us a little bit about, what you've been doing to help those in need, because obviously there was various areas where people required a lot of help. If you can first tell us.
Yeah, so it started off with the second wave rising around, I think, sometime around April or March end. And when I noticed that there are a lot of cases in and around my locality, so I put out a tweet that if anyone needs help in running errands and who are in isolation, they can reach out to me and I'll be happy to help. But as things progressed, it started getting worse, right? So people started reaching out with all sorts of requests, from remdesivir to oxygen beds to ICU and whatnot. So the only attempt for me personally, and even for the entire team at ICLU, was to find out resources, look for resources, and patch them with the people in need, so that at the earliest they could be given medical care.
Okay. And in fact, how did you make this sort of bigger? Because you even helped, people who needed the remdesivir injections, aside from running errands. How did you manage to get through that entire process?
So it was more like this. There was this gap in terms of access and people in need. So the only major request, or rather the role that we played, was bridging that gap by sourcing information, finding out where something is available or what the process is to avail something. And accordingly, we were able to help a lot of people, and we're still helping.
Okay. Any sort of challenges or the main obstacles that you faced while you were trying to, do all of this and help out those in need? What would you say were your main challenges and obstacles?
Something that is like the two things that I can readily speak of. One is a lot of misinformation is there, like on the internet, where you'll come across so many numbers or informations of sources that do not exist or are fraud. So to tackle those is a major issue. And another major issue is that anyone can reach out to you with any kind of help, and time is of the essence in this case. So hands-on approach and staying calm is like something which is very important, and it's difficult also. But then there's nothing that we can do except for just putting ourselves there and helping as many people as possible.
Right. Junaid, coming back to you here, if you can also tell us, aside from both of you, were there others that joined in and helped out to do all of this? So how many of you were there on ground, either, driving the ambulances or helping people, doing the paperwork that is required? How many of you were there?
Around 6 people with the group of 3, means a pair. So we used to cater for around all the ambulances. Initially, whenever there is a scaredness, we used to go alone. But usually we used to go as a team.
Okay. And in fact, Rikit, if you can also tell us, how many people were there on ground and helping out, how many of you?
So here's the thing, that different kinds of teams and different people approaching it in different way in different parts of the city, or rather the country. So there's this team that my friend was heading until the plasma therapy was being allowed by ICMR. A team of 8, which is largely comprising of young women from Delhi, operating and sourcing information of plasma donors. And at our team at ICLU, there are around 40 volunteers who are largely students, law students, or even school students who have been sourcing information and helping people. And even in Hyderabad, we have a lot of people like Mr. Charan, Sugandh sir, and all of these people. Like, we've not met, but there's these just wanting to help people as much as possible and trying to source in information and other resources just so that we could save lives.
And the same question that I was in fact asking even Zohaib and Junaid with regard to oxygen, because there was a time when oxygen was an extremely limited supply. Hospitals themselves were facing a lot of crunch. What did you do to try and source oxygen, to get hold of it, to provide it to those who needed it?
So I can think of a specific case wherein someone who could not be hospitalized due to other underlying complications, due to fear of infection. So they had to be given oxygen at their home place. So what we did was, we were able to find a person who back in October got oxygen, and they had a spare oxygen cylinder. So we traveled to a place in Secunderabad and took it from there and put it across approximately 40 kilometers a travel, and we placed that cylinder at their place. So things like these, through which we could also at the same time save lives and also make use of resources that are lying somewhere untapped.
Okay. Zohib, coming to you on how the situation, of course, we do know now numbers are down. Things seem to be looking up a bit in terms of compared to what it was earlier on. But on ground, since you've been helping out people and doing this for quite some time now, how have things changed now?
What I see is the new cases, because the testings are not really done. So the new cases from past 15 days have reduced. But for me, I don't know, I have been getting the death rate to be a little bit gradually going down, but still the death rate is there, whoever is admitted in the hospital. So the aged people, the death rate every day, like it is not as much as the numbers what we used to do in the first or second week. But now also we have the death rate. But other than that, on the death rate, most of these black fungus cases have been arised now. So in Bangalore, we did a patient with,
Right.
she was
Right.
She was undergoing the treatment, and between that, she was affected by the black fungus. The other case, which I just did yesterday, that was he had recovered from COVID-19 around 3 months before. And now he has been affected with the black fungus. And then, as I told, the beds were not available. So we had to take the patient for 600 kilometers via Hyderabad. So there he had got an allotment from the government for the bed. So now I just got a call that he has been infected badly up to his brain and he needs in surgery. So now the things and cases have been turning out in a different way.
Yes. So, Junaid, if you would just like to add to that, because black fungus cases obviously is becoming an extremely important and extremely concerning issue right now, and it spreads very fast. So, how are you dealing with, helping those people? And the other question, just to take Zoe's point forward, are you still seeing that there is a lack of beds that are available in hospitals right now?
Not really, not really. On the black fungus cases, yes, there is a lack of beds for the black fungus patients and the medicines for the black fungus. It is no more for the remdesivir and whatever for the COVID and the corona things what we required, like the oxygen cylinders or the plasma or the remdesivir or other medicines which were asked in first 3 weeks. That is not as much required now. It is moreover the black fungus beds are not available for the patients, and also the medicines given to the black fungus is really not available. Many of the hospital authorities are giving the
a big issue
for the patients
as far as the medicines for the.
And they're asking them to get.
Yes.
Yeah, and now with we are not getting the active COVID cases much, but we are getting more of after COVID. People infected with black fungus cases, and another thing is getting a NICU and ICU is still a bit of a risky thing. Means we are not getting so many beds of NICU and ventilated beds, but general bed and pre-recovery beds are available.
Okay, Rikit, in your view, what you've seen on ground, between what it was, the situation was, say, a few weeks or a few months ago compared to now, what is the change that you have seen? Where are there still gaps that exist right now?
Ma'am, lastly, I think although COVID cases have considerably come down, the next big challenge, like Sir just said about black fungus, and the second is post-COVID complications. And even in post-COVID complications, you have a lot of people who require blood donations, and the requirement, like at least the cases that we've been catering to in the past 1 week, is huge. People require a lot of blood transfusion, and given the fact that there is the second wave and the fear is so much that people are not willing to come out and donate blood, and to make sure that someone who requires blood gets it at the earliest is kind of proving to be a difficult task. And this is the kind of request that we're catering to largely right now at the increasing level.
Right. And Rikit, my final question to you, if you had to pass on a message right now about how people can come forward and help those around them, what are the small ways, what would you say?
Uh, the solely because the only request that we're largely getting right now is for blood donations. So if you're not yet vaccinated or you're not infected with any other disease and you're eligible to donate blood, please go to your nearest hospital and make sure that you donate blood, because in a place like Hyderabad, there are a lot of outstation patients who have come here from different states and regions, and they do not necessarily have those resources where they can call their friends or family to come and donate blood. So it would be more than helpful and important if you could donate blood and save lives.
All right. And Zohaib, Junaid, either one of you would like to take this about what would be your message to people, small ways in which all of us can sort of go out and help others who might be in need.
As a citizen of India, this is everyone's responsibility. Don't sit at home and just be watching through your WhatsApp and other things. Whatever the bit, whatever you can, even a glass of like water, food, medicines, anything, please come out and do whatever you can and help the country in this. This is the time.
And another thing is the major problem which we are going to face, which I feel in the future, is you need to make sure that you also talk to people. People have stopped talking to people. You need to, if a person is affected, give him hope rather than separating him from the society. Give him hope. Tell him it's all right. And till the patient doesn't lose hope, he'll survive. That's the whole point. And that's what I want to say.
All right, Junaid, Zohaib, and Rikit, thank you so much, three of you, an absolute inspiration. Talking to you, all of you, and understanding how you've been helping people. Thank you for joining us. On that note, it's time to wrap up this edition of Inspire India. Thank you so much for watching.